Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today is Dushke Styles here. Thank you for stopping right here on my space. In today's tutorial, I'll be giving you all a detailed process on how to go about the drafting and cutting of this beautiful gown you see at the right side of the screen. So what attracted me to this particular gown is the neckline. It has this unique and stylish neckline coupled with a Queen Anne neckline as well. It has ruffles at the base of the gown, which makes it more pronounced and very stylish and beautiful. So if this is all you're interested in learning how to make today, please continue watching. It's 100% beginners friendly, and without much ado, let's get started. I'm on a size 12 and I made use of 2.5 yards of this black crepe fabric you see right here on the screen to make this particular dress which we are about to draft in today's tutorial. So you can decide on how many yards you can use depending on your body size. You can use more or less, and my organza, which is the pink material, is 4.5 yards. So I have my pattern paper and my stress ruler and my curve rule, my pencil and my marker as well with my pattern paper. So I'm going to start by marking this line across at the top of my paper, which will be my shoulder line. So for this particular pattern paper I have right here with me, is going to be enough for the circumference or the largest circumference on my body, which is my hip. I divided my hip by 4, and what I got was 10 3/4, and I added extra 2 inches to that, which is going to be enough for my allowance. Now I folded in 1/2 inch from the center front right there. As you can see, I'm bringing it out right here. So that 1/2 inch is actually for me to get my zipper allowance, because I'll be using this particular pattern paper for the front part and the back part of my dress. So I folded that 1/2 inch back inside so that I can start drafting. Now on that first line, which is my shoulder line, I divided my shoulder of 14 inches into 2. I marked 7 inches on that point, and from that 7 inches point I marked down 8 inches. So I've always said that 8 inches is normal for an adult armhole, so long as you're not on a bust size of 48 inches upward. 8 inches is perfectly fine, and that is what I've been working with. So I wrote this line into a straight line now, and I labeled it my chest line. So I'll place my tape on the first line, which is my shoulder line, and I will get 10 inches, which is my bust point. So I'll connect that into a straight line. I'll also place my tape from my shoulder line, and I'll get my half length of 16 inches. I'll also connect that into a straight line. I'll do the same thing and get my hip length, okay, because this is a full scale basic bodice. That is what I'm trying to draft out here. So from my half length, I counted 8.5 inches downward to get my hip length of 24.5 inches. I made that point right there, and I'm connecting it into a straight line. So the length of this gown I'm working with right here is 40 inches. I also place my tape on my shoulder line, and I'm marking 40 inches now, which is the length of the gown I'm working with right here. So I will go ahead and label all of these lines I've marked out right here, starting from my hip line, my half length or my waistline, then my bust points line. Then I already labeled that first line, sorry, the second line, which is my chest line. Now on my armhole line, I will divide it into 2 equal halves, and I have 4 inches. I'll make a point on that 4 inches and go in by 1/2 inch. Now on this line, which is my chest line, that is where I'll divide my bust circumference by 4. So whatever I had, I marked it right there on my chest line by placing it from the center front of this my paper towards this other side. So now I'm going to connect all these dots I've made right here so far from the shoulder using my curve rule and placing it very well this way. I hope you can see what I'm doing so far, right? So I'll create my neckline now by marking a neckline of 3 inches on exactly that my shoulder line. That is for my neck width. Now for my neck depth, from my shoulder line, I'll come down by at least 6 inches. So you can go deeper or you can go higher than this, depending on the effort you're trying to achieve. But when I'm done with mine, you see how it looks on me. So now we've connected these 2 points together. So I'm going to come to that point on my armhole, and I'm going to go up by 1.5 inches. Okay, then from my center front of my paper, I'm going to go up from that point by at least 3/4 inch. You can go up by 1/2 inch to 3/4 inch. Now these 2 points, I'm going to connect them together this way, so you can see. Then the next I'm going to do now is to create a Queen Anne neckline first, before I go ahead to actually manipulate the neckline to get that shape we have already. Now from my armhole, I will go in by 1.5 inches, and then from my neck width, I'm going to connect this into this 1.5 inches I marked right here on my armhole. So you can see what we have. We have created a neckline shape, which also has a normal neckline. So on that part where I connected into my armhole on this line, I came down by 3.5 inches from my shoulder line. So before I connect this towards the other side, from the center front of my neckline, I'll mark about 1 inch inside. So I'm going to also connect these points together. So this is something you actually have to take your time to do so that you don't get confused at all. Okay, so please, I hope you assimilate this very well and you also understand as well. So we are done now with the creation of the upper body part of this dress. I just went ahead to mark 1/2 inch away from my shoulder line to get my shoulder slants, and that is it. So the next is to move to the body part of this dress. Now on the waistline, I will get my nipple to nipple point of 7 inches and divide it into 2. That's 3.5 inches. I marked it on this my waistline, and I'm going to extend this point on all these other lines this way. Now at both sides on my dart, I marked 1/2 inch away from my dart leg, as you can see. Then from my waistline, I marked 5 inches upward towards my bust point, and I also marked 6 inches downward towards my hip line on that same dart I have already. So using my ruler now, the stretch ruler, I'll connect all these points this way. So this is how I'm creating my dart for this particular gown. Okay, so I believe everything right here is very clear to you all. So the next, I divided my waist circumference of 32 inches into 4. I marked 8 inches right there on my waistline. My hip circumference is 43 inches divided by 4 is 10 3/4. So I went ahead to mark what I have on my hip line. I measured out what I had on my hip line, and I'm subtracting 1.5 inches from that. Now I marked it on the full length of this my gown. So all these points I've created so far, I'm going to connect them together this way using this other part of my ruler. So I've connected from my chest line to my waistline. Now I'm connecting from my waistline to my hip line. So the next is to connect from my hip line to the ends or the base of this my pattern paper, or where my gown will be stopping. So you can see what I have so far. So all I'm going to do now is to replace this my dart on the waistline. So if you have been following me on this channel, you understand the way I usually replace my dart. The exact way and place it was taken, that is the exact place I also replace my dart. It doesn't exceed the lines. Okay, so that by the time you are done stitching your dart, you can also have your dress fitted on you. So I've replaced my dart right here, as you can see clearly. And the next thing I'm going ahead to do is to add my stitching allowance of 1.5 inches. So my stitching allowance is usually 1 inch or 1.5 inches. I do not exceed that, okay, to avoid excess bulge at the sides of your dress when you are done sewing. So I connected this using my free hand, but you can also use your ruler and connect this in case you are not really familiar with using your free hand to connect your points. So I now cut out the sides, I cut out the base, and I also cut out the armhole of this my dress. So I'm not touching the neckline yet because I already said I'll be using this to cut out for the back part. I slashed this now from the middle part of this my pattern paper, and you can see how nice it's looking both on the darts and also on the upper part of this dress. I have my crepe fabric right here, which I folded into 2. I got the upper part after slashing the upper part of this my dress. Before I started pinning this my pattern paper on my fabric, I made sure that I brought out that 1/2 inch, which is going to be for the zipper allowance, as earlier mentioned. Okay, so I pinned my pattern paper all around on this my fabric, and this is what I have. So right now I'm going to determine the neck depth of this my back part of my gown. From the shoulder line, I marked 2 inches below. Then from that neck width, I connected it using my curve rule to this 2 inches point. So now I'm going to cut this out. So for the back part, we are going to have a normal round neckline. Okay, so after cutting the neck, I also cut out the shoulder slant. So for the base, I left 1/2 inch, which will be for the joining allowance to the lower part or the skirt part of our gown. Now when I get to the zipper part, I'll also cut this out through just this way. Now I'm going to raise this my pattern paper up on that zipper allowance side, and I'll mark 1 inch upward this way from the base. Now from this other side of my dress, I'm going to come in by at least 3 inches. So I'm going to connect these 2 points together using my straight ruler. So when you do this, it's going to slant. It will get rid of any sort of bulge at the back of your dress whenever you are done sewing. I also went ahead to notch my dart. So I didn't want to make these cuts on my pattern paper. That is why I did it on my fabric. So I kept the upper part of this my dress aside. I'm going to also cut out for the skirt part, for the back part of our gown. So you can see that I also brought out that 1/2 inch, which is for a zipper allowance for the skirt part. So I folded my fabric again into 2, and I arranged this my pattern paper on top of this my fabric, and I went ahead to pin. So for the base, I left about 1 inch, which would be for my hemming allowance, and for the top part I left about 3/4 inch, which will be for the joining allowance as well. So I also repeated the same thing on the zipper area by coming down now by 1 inch and going in at this other side by 3 inches and connecting these 2 lines and cut it out. So I'm done with the back part of our gown. So I'll fold in back that 1/2 inch zipper allowance because our zipper allowance is not added to the front part. So I'll now go ahead and cut out the neckline for the front part of my dress. Now on this queen and neckline part, I'll cut it out and stop exactly on that line. Okay, you can see that line. All right, so please be careful on the lines you're cutting. Just watch what I'm doing. I cut off this other side, so I'll be referring to this upper part now as the yoke. So I also cut off this other triangular shape. So at this point you can see what we have. So I don't have my pattern paper folded into 2 as I'm drafting. That is why you can't really see the full effect, but when I'm done cutting it out on my fabric, you're going to see what it looks like. So in order for me not to get confused, I would have to go ahead and label this part my shoulder, okay, and this other part I'll just label it my organza, because this other part which is in the middle was cut on our organza. And I also made arrow shapes to indicate how it will be joined when I cut out on my fabric. So this is all we have, and we are done. The next is to cut out now that part which I labeled my organza on this my organza fabric actually. So I folded this into 4 pieces, and I now brought that part I labeled my organza, and I'm placing it right here from that folded part of my organza at that center front. You have fold and place my pattern paper this way on top. So all around this piece, I'm going to leave about 1/2 inch, which will be for our joining allowance. So when I folded this my organza into 4, after cutting out, I'm going to be having 2 pieces because this organza will be serving as the lining piece as well for stitching this part. So I'll also get the black crepe I have so that I can cut out the body part of my dress. So I placed the front part of my upper dress exactly from the folded center of my fabric. Now I'm pinning this all around. At the base, I left 1/2 inch for joining an allowance to the skirt part, and at this top part I also left 1/2 inch, which will be for our stitching allowance to the lining part of this our dress. So I'm done cutting, and I also notched my dart. I'll also pin the skirt part of my pattern paper on my fabric folded into 2. Then at the base, I'll leave 1 inch for hemming for hemming, and at the top part of my skirt I left 1/2 inch and notched my dart as well. So for this other part labeled the shoulder, I folded my black crepe fabric into 2. I added 1/2 inch for stitching allowance all around, excluding the top part which is the shoulder, and also the other side which is the armhole. So with the help of this arrow, I'm able to place these 2 pieces together right here. So that is what is going to help me while I'm joining. Okay, so here is the other body part. So at this point we are done now with the body parts of this particular gown. So what is left is the ruffles for the organza and the sleeve as well, which I'll be sharing with you all a detailed process on how to go about all of that in the second part of this tutorial, which is going to be the sewing part. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you found this tutorial helpful. I'll see you in the second part of this tutorial. Also forget to subscribe to my channel. Have a lovely time ahead of you. Bye.